In the eyes of many, Count Dooku was always a villain, the evil Sith Lord who plunged the galaxy into a civil war and eventually caused the rise of the Empire and the fall of the Jedi. But not too many know Dooku was once an honorable man, an idealist who only wanted what was best for the galaxy. Where people saw order and freedom, Dooku saw a kind of corruption he wanted to destroy. His idealism, however, came at the cost of his morals, allowing the dark side to consume and lead him to his eventual downfall. Chapter 1. From Riches to Temple Life. Dooku's story begins in 102 BBY, in the High Republic's fading light. He opened his eyes on Sereno, a world of old forest and named after its former ruling family, the House Sereno. His father was Count Gora, and his mother was Countess Anya. In the present days, their house had ruled for generations, but their son was born with something unforeseen in his blood. The Force had touched the infant. What should have been a blessing became a curse in his father's mind. Gora feared the strange. He feared the whispers that followed Force sensitives. He called them freaks, and he decided his heir would not be one of them. Gora sent word to the Jedi Order, "Come take the child," before carrying the infant to the edge of his own lands and leaving him at the forest line with no name and no clothes. Night pressed close on as Spine Wolf stalked the shadows. Cold crept into the baby's bones before a Jedi Seeker found him, just as death was on the child's doorstep. That rescuer brought him to Coruscant, where the Grand Temple took him in. The Order gave him a name that already belonged to him. Dooku was to be his new identity. Not too long after Dooku was given a new identity and path, he joined the Jedi Temple's Hawkbat clan, where younglings laughed and sparred together. Dooku, however, was known to not laugh that much. Instead, he preferred to focus on his studies and training. Unlike most unruly kids, he followed the rules set like stepping stones, seeking to be perfect. He compared himself against every other child in the clan, working very hard, having a discipline that was unmatched, as he would get up early in the morning and go to sleep late in the evenings. Master Terra Nube guided his clan and noticed the boy who wanted to be perfect, but he also saw the cost. Dooku had distanced himself from his peers through his actions. His distance bred tension. One youngling called Arath Terex disliked him especially. Terex was quick with word and mocked Dooku as his excellency, a reference to Dooku's heritage. The others sometimes laughed along because it was easier to laugh than to be pulled into a feud. Dooku tried to ignore the insults. Instead, he put the heat in his chest into his practice drills and training. As he struggled mingling with the other kids, there was one friendship that did come from his time at the clan. Sifo-Dyas was restless and bright and saw the world in ways other kids didn't. Dooku admired that boldness while Sifo-Dyas admired Dooku's discipline. Together, they balanced each other, even often getting into trouble because of their minor misadventures. But in those first years, their bond mostly meant shared training halls and whispered plans to sneak extra study time in the archives. But the past followed Dooku even as he tried to outrun it. Chapter 2. The Bitter Homecoming. In 90 BBY, the Order sent a group to Sereno for a grand festival, with Grandmaster Yoda leading the party. Master Sinube and Eula Braylon came as well. Younglings, including Dooku and Sifo, traveled with them to learn by watching their elders in public. Sereno welcomed the Jedi with a big welcoming ceremony. Meanwhile, Dooku walked the streets of his former home planet. During a demonstration of saber forms, a loud sound cracked through the sky. Two children ran laughing through the smoke and sound as they had set off some thunderburst caps. Dooku saw the kids and thought he knew one of the faces and decided to slip away in pursuit. At the fairground, he caught up to the two young nobles and found them cornered by thugs. Dooku did not hesitate. Using the Force and an electro blade, he drove the thugs back. The children introduced themselves as Jinsa and Ramil, and when Dooku told them he was born on Sereno, they offered him a tour through his home planet, which he had never seen before. They moved through the festival together where, for a few hours, Dooku got a taste of the life he could have had if he'd never left this world. Jinsa led him to the Great Assembly, where she told him stories about Sereno and how its noble families defeated the Sith Empire. But as Dooku listened to the stories, an ancient carving called to him. It was of Tirataka, an ancient dragon from lore. Jinsa warned him to leave it, but he touched it anyway. Suddenly, the ground shook as the building trembled and buried them underneath them. They survived, and Dooku tried to lift the wreckage with the Force, But before he could do anything, Master Yoda arrived and moved the debris for them. The Masters cleared the ruin as Count Gora stormed forward when he heard the involvement of a kid named Dooku. He faced Yoda furiously, proclaiming that he never wanted to see his son again. In that moment, a young Jedi learned the history of his own origin. Jinza was his sister, and Ramil was his brother, whereas Gora was his father. Right then and there, he learned he was the cast-off. Back on Coruscant, Dooku asked Yoda for the full truth. The Grand Master told the story of how Gora had called the order and then abandoned the baby on the forest edge. Dooku pictured the wolves in the cold as anger, and fear rose. But instead of letting his emotions get the best of him, he poured them into training. But as he kept himself busy, Dooku obtained a device tuned to a secure channel. It was the only way he and his sister could speak in private without anyone knowing they had been in contact since their fateful encounter on Sereno. But as much as Dooku wanted to experience the same things his sister was allowed to have, he kept his hunger for belonging from his voice, knowing that his fate was tied to the Jedi, and his studies were what kept him from that feeling of want. Chapter 3. First Exposure to the Sith. 2 years had passed since that bitter homecoming, and the archives became Dooku's second home. One day, after yet another lesson, Sifo-Dyas pulled Dooku into a quiet corner and revealed the Journal of Claes Teradine, an expelled Jedi. The pages hinted at a locked trove below the library called the Bogan Collection. Sifo wanted to see it, and although Dooku always adhered to the Jedi rules, the potential to gain more knowledge overrode his will to stick to rules. He let curiosity get the better of him, and the duo made their way to a room where the Order hid artifacts younglings should never see. Inside the archives, they found different dark side artifacts, scrolls, and weapons. A fragment of metal called Dooku towards. Dooku reached for the fragment, and as soon as he did, the Tirataka from Sereno roared in his mind, leading him to panic. Dooku lashed out uncontrollably with the Force and accidentally threw Sifo-Dyas across the room, which alerted the chief librarian to their presence. They were brought to the infirmary where Sifo-Dyas' wounds were treated. Master Yoda and Master Braylon came by, being very disappointed in the boy's actions. But in the midst of the lecture, another voice joined the room. It was Lena Costana. She worried that younglings even managed to slip into a vault that should have been ironclad. She and the Masters debated what it meant to prepare children for darkness. As that was happening, Dooku listened and memorized every word. Despite Costana's presence, the boys were still punished to decipher the Lotho Papyri, a collection of agricultural treaties. But Sifo found a secret book that Costana slipped into the papyrus. This was the Bestiary of Darth Kaldoth, a Sith work. Dooku wanted him to report it, but Sifo refused. The refusal gnawed at Dooku until worry turned to suspicion. He confronted Costana on the contemplation balcony, demanding an answer. He wondered whether or not she was secretly Sith, but Costana answered that this was simply a test. Dooku, however, sensed anger and frustration within Costana, allowing him to actually believe he was confronting a Sith Lord. The two engaged in a short duel where Costana spoke about Darth Sakia and the curved hilt the Sith used, similar to Dooku's own lightsaber hilt. She also told him she was aware of Dooku's connection to the Tirataka. Despite Costana's experience, she began to realize how skilled the young Dooku was. The Jedi Initiate broke her defense with a flurry of attacks that became part of his signature fighting style. Yoda, however, arrived in time to break the fight, telling Dooku he had jumped to a conclusion. At the same time, the Grand Master also chided Costana for her methods. But something changed after that. Dooku kept seeing Costana when she returned from missions, seeing her as a mentor. He wanted to understand the darkness rather than run from it. It didn't take time for him long to engage himself with her theories about the Sith. Curiosity took over the young Dooku, who continued to incorporate his studies into his philosophies and fighting style, eventually becoming a prodigy among the many Jedi initiates he trained with. Chapter 4. The Grand Master's Apprentice. In 86 BBY, Dooku finished his initiate trials and set his hopes on Lena Costana, thinking his mentor would choose him as her Padawan. The Padawan tournament arrived, and Dooku met Sifo-Dyas in the ring. He fought with one hand behind his back and a blindfold over his eyes, but still won. The victory did not bring the prize he wanted. Costana chose Sifo-Dyas. Dooku felt the sting of it, yet the hurt faded when none other than Grandmaster Yoda stepped forward and claimed him as his apprentice. A bond grew between student and master. Yoda took Dooku out into the galaxy and let the stars do part of the teaching. They voyaged to La Spain in the Mid-Rim and walked through forest on Kashyyyk, where the air hummed with life. There, Dooku watched Yoda stand before a giant Terran Tatic. He saw how calm his master could be, and how Yoda used this discipline and serenity as a shield. But while the master and pupil bonded, Dooku's renegade personality was often a problem Yoda had to endure. Not too long after, Sifo-Dyas saw a vision of a giant solar storm coming for Proto-Branch. He told the council that Dooku sided with Sifo-Dyas and with Kostana to warn the planet. The council, however, decided to do nothing, believing that not all visions were meant to happen. Yoda agreed with that line and the door closed in their faces. Despite that, Dooku's defiance opened another door. He, Kostana, and Sifo-Dyas went to Proto-Branch's Senator Teveti and warned him of the danger. However, the senator seemed rather disinterested, only seeing a danger for the planet's resources rather than their population, so they went to Proto-Branch with a reluctant Yoda. The storm came as Sifo-Dyas had seen it, killing a big part of the population. Meanwhile, the Jedi barely lived through it. But as Dooku survived, his faith in the Jedi had a first crack. His trust in the Council thinned, along with his respect for the Republic for him. Republic leaders were more concerned with counting resources and profits before counting the dead. That was unforgettable and unforgivable for the young Dooku. By 82 BBY, Dooku was 20 and back on Sereno for his mother's funeral. Anya lay at rest. His father Gora met grief with rage and struck him with words and fists. "Freak," Gora said. Despite the pain he felt, Dooku focused on a new mission at hand. He, Sifo-Dyas, and Kostana went on a mission to track down a relic on Asusto, believing they were following a trail of Sith artifacts. But this was a trap set by the Presagers of Hakote, a ritualistic organization that existed on Hakote. They captured Dooku to use him for a dark side ritual. During that time, Dooku experienced the series of visions of his future, and amidst such darkness, he used Force lightning for the first time to kill his captors, allowing him to step into the world of the dark side against his wishes. Kostano and Sifo-Dyas, however, kept him from plunging deeper into darkness by teaching him a cleansing ritual involving arm wrappings designed to keep him centered in the Force. For now, he was still well in the light. Chapter 5. Master to Qui-Gon Jinn. Between 82 and 78 BBY, Dooku completed his training with Yoda and rose to Jedi Knight. Yoda saw him as one of the greatest Padawan he had ever had in his centuries-old life. Soon thereafter, he became a Jedi Master. Eventually, he set aside his first weapon and forged a curved hilt that fit the line of his wrist. With his specialized lightsaber and fighting style, he soon became one of the best duelists in the galaxy. He soon stood among the finest Jedi of his era, and campaigns across the Republic built him a great reputation. Dooku soon became an instructor for the Thranta clan, teaching them his brand of swordsmanship and discipline. He also became a mentor. Dooku took Rael Averross as his Padawan and trained him for 10 years. Rael went on to reach knighthood under him. During those years, Dooku did not remain within the temple alone. He traveled to Dathomir and rendered aid to Mother Talzin of the Night Sisters in what turned to a long-time partnership. He gave her a lock of his hair in what was an exchange that set a brief accord between different paths. In 68 BBY, Dooku accepted a second student. Qui-Gon Jinn was 12 and newly assigned. On the evening of the assignment, the boy presented himself in Dooku's quarters and tried to look calm. Then Dooku asked if the boy was afraid. Jinn confessed that he was. He said he did not fear Dooku, but feared failing to become a Jedi. He feared that he might not be worthy. Dooku went straight to the root of the fear, which was a future where the young Jinn might fear himself, and a future that might not be the one he wanted. Instead of rejecting Qui-Gon, Dooku surprised him. He called the answer wise, because most Padawans either deny fear or cannot name it. He praised the boy's insight and told him that truth sharpened courage. It didn't take long for Dooku to drill into Qui-Gon the same interest he had for knowledge, artifacts, and prophecies. The young Jinn learned from his master that the Jedi no longer believed in prophets, prophecies, and visions. Despite that, the master and apprentice duo developed a certain kind of fascination for tales of visions and prophecies, eventually helping Qui-Gon's own philosophies and beliefs. Months later, the Council sent them to Shurapak, where a battle burned across the surface. It was Jen's first war. When they landed, they found Rael Averross among the fighters. Dooku introduced his former student to his new one, and the three spoke like soldiers at a crossroads. Soon, a strike team formed to hunt the Falleen bounty hunter Shinda Mal. During the search, Jen was seized Shinda and held at gunpoint. Before she could kill the boy, Dooku struck, lightning flashing from his hand. Mo fell, with Jen telling Rael what had happened. Rael was not shocked, understanding that Dooku was going to do whatever it takes to get the job done with minimal casualties. The next missions were full of pain and politics. Senator Dagonet's son had been abducted, prompting the Council to send Dooku and Jin to the Senator's home world. There, they found a land stripped by mines and mills. They walked toward a barren village under a haze of smoke. The villagers were silent before learning that the duo were Jedi and not agents of the Senator. They were afraid of their own Senator. A woman then spoke of how their world had been drained of resources and essentially forgotten by their leader. Eventually, they found the Senator's son, bound but unharmed. Dooku asked what he knew of the lives of those who held him. The boy said he did not blame them. A runner arrived and announced that Dagonet had landed with soldiers. The kidnappers accused the Jedi of leading them into a trap. Dooku studied them and said the Senator did not know of the investigation. Outside, the Senator handed bread to the villager who had betrayed the hiding place. Another villager muttered that many would do the same. Dagonet ordered Dooku and Jin to take villagers and return his son. Dooku, however, relented, saying that their investigation was not complete. And when the Senator demanded obedience, Dooku said the Jedi served the people of the Republic and not its leaders. Dooku's defiance led to a firefight where soldiers raised rifles and villagers were forced to fight. Dagonet gave the Jedi one last chance to step aside. As hard as the Jedi tried, they could not halt the rising slaughter. When most of the villagers had fallen, the Senator called a halt. Dooku stood among the citizens of the Republic, killed by their own leader. Rage rose in him with the shape of justice. He reached into the dark and lifted his hand. The Senator's throat tightened, but Jen shouted for his master to stop. Dooku hurled him backward against the barn door and kept the crushing grip in place. He walked forward through the smoke, with soldiers stumbling out of his path. He stood over the politician and squeezed harder. Jen saw one thread left. He cut the boy free and brought him into the square. The son rushed to his father and begged Dooku to spare him, with Qui-Gon saying it was over. Dooku released the hold, and the Senator collapsed and, clinging to his breath, stared up in shock. Afterward, the Senator left with his son as the young man promised to work for his people. Dooku, though, doubted that anything would change. Jen asked whether doubt had driven him, but his master only praised him for saving the lives. He even said his student was a wiser man than himself as they walked back to their ship.